Welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we help non-techs build better tech. Today I have Adam Caines. Welcome, Adam, and thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much for having me, Anthony.
Why don't you I'll let you introduce yourself to the audience and explain a little bit about what you do in your background.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. So my role currently is a founder and chief product officer of a company called Uplift. And what we do at Uplift is we help companies manage and work with their contingent workforces. So we really empower companies to define their talent experiences from when talent first come across companies through to hiring, onboarding, pay, and compliance, and really help them build experiences from that front to back office. We also help create new ways of working with those contingent workforces, using automation, using AI where it makes sense, and then helping companies essentially make better business decisions and drive business outcomes. Also, I provide sort of consulting and advisory to a number of different startups in the ecosystem, working with some of the VCs as part of their coaching and mentoring programs as well. Most background is kind of big consulting, worked across large programs and projects, all technology-based projects and programs, and across different industries with kind of a big focus on fintech and payments in the last sort of 10 years or so since I've been in Australia.
Yeah, there's been a huge explosion there on the fintech side in the last 10 years.
Implosion and explosion, yeah.
Yeah, and then probably exploding again. It's interesting to see how those cycles go. The fintechs, was it just around COVID or just before COVID when money was cheap, as people say? Then There was a lot of money being thrown around the fintechs because that was going to be the new wave, and I'm not sure how many buy now pay later companies you can have in the market.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's definitely changed.
Yeah. So, as a CPO, that'll be a chief product officer, not chief person, yes. I'm assuming, based on your background, because some people might get the two mixed. What sort of tips or focus do you have on guiding a product for a startup and getting them to market? Because it's really about getting that product market fit at the end of the day. Yeah,
definitely. And, there's been a lot of work and research done into different processes you can follow, sort of like the lean approaches and things like that. In my experience, I mean, it's different if you're thinking about financial products. There's certain barriers to entry and regulatory hurdles you need to get through, but generally if you're in a more open ecosystem where you can get something in front of a customer, the best thing to do is to get something in front of a customer and test and learn as quickly as possible. And that could mean the sort of swan approach where everything looks great up front, but in the background it's all spreadsheets and manual processes and people over technology, and then build in where it makes sense to sort of solve those problems over time. But if you can get like a straight through experience to a customer as quickly as possible to see if it adds value and is actually solving a problem that they have, then that's the best thing you can build off of, is having that core that core input, and obviously not building for the sake of building because it's a cool idea and you think it's going to solve a problem. Like, validation is critical, and validating up front and researching enough before you even think about solving a problem as well, to see has the problem been solved before by someone else and it's failed or it's succeeded, and therefore does it need to be solved again, or can it be solved in a better way, or looking at things and how can you differentiate to competitors and stand out. What will that mean for my business, and how will that mean I could get customers, raise money, go to market, expand where it might be. But yeah, that sort of test and learn approach I think is probably pretty critical, and obviously you don't want to spend a ton of money building something that nobody uses either.
Yep, we've seen that a lot when we what we term rescue projects that come to us. They get built either because the client didn't understand what they were telling the team to do, or the team just took what they said verbatim and built as it was, not provided direction. And then things are being built and no validation's taken place. So in saying that, in line with what you said, how would you sort of say or what experience have you had with taking a product from the idea to either an MVP or just a click-through prototype, which may be enough to validate a concept?
Yeah, prototyping is a really great approach because you can, knock something up in Figma or a similar product, even using like a Miro board to create wireframes, and just go and sit in front of a friendly customer and say, would this solve the problem if you had this as a product? And click-through prototypes can be very powerful because if you go and speak to somebody and say, would this help you? Everyone will say yes. Oh, of course that would help me. That doesn't mean that they're going to buy it or spend money on it, right? So,
Yeah.
but having something that's tangible that they can see does really help that conversation. But then again, at the end, you do need to be like, and what would you pay for this? Like, would you pay for it if I built it? Would you pay me $1? Would you pay me $1,000? Like, what's the, what is an amount of money? And this is something that the StartMate team do really well in the accelerator program, is just get somebody to pay for something. Like, that proves that the product is worth something and, is valuable to a business. If no one's willing to pay for it, even if you build it, then, what's the point, right? So it doesn't matter what you get for it, just try and find someone that will pay you for it.
Yeah, and that's probably the best kind of validation you can
Yeah.
get, as opposed to I'll use it, and then they not really know what the person's talking
Yeah,
about.
and definitely don't ask your friends as well, because they'll always say, yeah, it's a great idea. Ask people that you don't know, or people that are really feeling that problem as well, because they're the people that are going to really validate whether it's worthwhile to solve.
Yeah, friends and family would just say yes because they want to help you and they think that's healthy.
Yeah, they might
But
be
you
useful.
really need
They might be useful for a friends and family round when you're looking to bootstrap an MVP. But
you need that feedback that's actually going to either put you in the right direction or help you correct your course to prevent you going down the wrong direction and building the wrong product, or stopping you.
Yep.
With trying to take payment and just saying, all right, can you charge $1 or $100 or $1,000 in that example? From your experience, have you seen that it's at that point you may have to pivot because the product that's being purchased for may be different than what you had in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I've not met many founders. I mean, I'm sure there are some examples where what they thought they were building is where they end up. I mean, we're in the same position. I've been in the same position a few times, where you're going to pivot at least 2 to 3 times in terms of what you're providing as a solution. Because what you think it exists does changes. Also, the world evolves. Lots of people 2 years ago didn't think they'd have to implement AI into their platforms, and now all of a sudden it's the only way to stand out, or even be an equalizer. So you're definitely going to pivot, that's for sure. Not necessarily huge pivots, maybe, but at least some minor kind of increments along the way. Definitely something that you have to bear in mind, and it can be hard for founders particularly to let go as well. So your willingness to sort of follow the feedback that you get and listen to it and be like, not say, well, that's not what we want to solve for and that's not what we envisioned at the start, is a trap that you can fall into. And you still have that kind of almost determination and ignorance to ignore actual, that feedback that you're getting from the market.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest trap founders that we've seen fall into. They're so set on their vision, and then that's how it has to be.
Yep.
That they're not listening to the cues that they're getting from the market or the stakeholders that they're meeting, and then getting that real fit, not the fit that they think they're getting.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where if you can validate someone's willing to pay you for it as well, like follow the money. Like, that's essentially.
Yeah, we're going through a similar journey at the moment. We're working on a product is built for ourselves, but the interest has been from the core of the platform, not the workflow that's for our business.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So we're getting different interest now, and then, all right, so that market is definitely, we would pay for it, but we're not paying for it because it's our own thing. But then, all right, how do we then pre-position that into another market and sell that as not what we thought it was originally going to be?
Yeah, exactly, and that's great. That's a good thing as well. There is another kind of trap to be wary of in that space as well, particularly when it comes to technologies. Not building technology because you're a technologist and it's cool, and you want to be able to do it because it's really interesting and innovative when you might not need it. And maybe AI is an example of that, where maybe many businesses are foundational AI companies, but it's not really solving the problem. It's just the kind of buzzword and the trend. Don't build for build's sake as well at the same time.
Yeah, I think that on touching on that AI piece, it's at the moment there's probably a lot of businesses just trying to play catch up and trying to figure out how do we put ChatGPT into a product.
Yes.
And then why? Because everyone else is doing it. And then, all right, that doesn't really serve the product, or you're not providing enough value. You're just putting in AI in there to now say you're an AI company.
Yeah.
When really you're just consuming an API. You're not doing anything.
Exactly, and that's and all of a sudden you'll find VCs and others going, oh, you're only using open source APIs like for AI, so like why are you not building your own models? And all of a sudden using ChatGPT is a bad thing, not a good thing.
I haven't seen that come to place yet, but is that what you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, I'm hearing a few kind of like, well, why are you not building your own IP in that space? It's not protectable, it's not defensible, so
Yeah.
there's no value in it.
Yeah, true. If everyone has it, it sort of diminishes its power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is quite a challenge, though, to go and play in that building your own model space.
Yeah,
It does
yeah.
take...
It does take time.
You're playing in what I call the real AI.
Yeah,
You're now building data sets, collecting training data,
yeah,
analyzing it, cleaning it, and getting it prepared to actually run a model. And you're not necessarily building a language model. You're doing the statistical probability model where you're
yeah.
giving this data, what's the percent of confidence I'm going to get out of it, or whatever it may be. So I'm a bit technical there, so I probably went too far for some of the listeners there. But yeah, there's ChatGPT, and then there's what I call real AI.
Yeah,
ChatGPT
exactly.
is built on real AI, but it's not what we use.
Yeah, and I think, there's not to say that you shouldn't integrate to open source to solve problems to make an experience better, but I wouldn't be underpinning my business as a foundation on an open source platform if that's what you're trying to do with AI. You should probably be looking into how you can build something that's more IP generative for the business, because you're not going to get a multiplier on an open source API.
Yeah, clearly not. You haven't put the work in. There's not much there. There's no moat,
Yeah,
as they say.
exactly, yeah.
So, as the CPO and you focus on product, why product? What got you into this space, and what fascinates you about it?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, my background originally was as like I started off as a Java developer back as a graduate in IBM in the UK 20 years ago, and sort of went through a few different things, a few different roles in the software lifecycle, and ended up in project management. And at the time, project management was very waterfall. Agile was just starting to come in, so we sort of had the idea of a Scrum and a business analyst, and products was just starting to evolve as sort of a bit of a new, I guess, job family, so to speak, that didn't exist before, compared to the traditional business analysts that would just hammer through requirements. And I think over time I just sort of became really interested in building things and being responsible for that sort of customer driven outcome. And project management is great, but only at a certain scale. So I sort of moved myself more into sort of agile delivery, and then became much more interested in that, talking to customers and understanding the problems, working with designers and developers to come up with solutions, and then really sort of owning that outcome and getting things into market. So yeah, I think the idea of building things with an execution side, project management at the scale that you'd work in startups kind of becomes a little redundant, and it kind of falls into the world of product to deliver. So it kind of works quite well for me from an execution perspective, but also helps me sort of meet the creativity side that I like to do as part of a role, and also talking to customers as well.
Yeah, I'll agree with what you're saying there. It's definitely the more creative side of the life cycle of a product with a development. It's where the ideas can come to place and how you actually put the solution together and fit the jigsaw pieces together to deliver something.
Yeah.
With a bit of a technical background, I have a technical background as well, so in my mind, it covers not just the AI, like the BA side, where you're just discussing requirements and rules. You're probably, in your mind, picturing how you would actually deliver that at a lower level,
Yes.
which is what I do. I'm not sure if that aligns to you as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, when we were, being built as consultants by the IBM machine back in the day, we were the intermediaries between the customers and the technical team, right? So, which is essentially product, right? You're there to work with, work with great technologists that are building great stuff, but then also make sure that they're building what's required in the right way for, what your customers need at the same time. And that sort of middle role, like having a technical background and some creativity helps to sort of be that intermediary and sort of have the direction. But having the vision, I guess, is the hard part as well. Particularly when I'm building my own product, it's a slightly different game in comparison to a customer problem that's given to you that you need to solve. When you're trying to find the problem and solve the problem, but have a vision as to how you evolve as a product in comparison to
you
others.
have to identify the real problem.
Yes. Yeah.
You're trying to identify the real problem and be a client to yourself.
Yeah, and keep yourself in check as well. Not build things because they're cool, like as mentioned before. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the biggest problem when you've got a bit of tech ability. It's just diving straight in and, I can do this, so we'll just do it.
Yeah.
Do you find that when you're working on your own product that it's sometimes difficult to draw out the detail because you know it, but you don't like document it or write it down because it's just something that you assume?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I guess in the business Uplift, my co-founders have both been in the industry from a domain perspective. Like my background is not in hiring and contingent workforces and recruitment, but my co-founders have both got 20, 30 years experience between them in the space. So I actually heavily lean on them from a domain experience perspective. So it's like a good combination of like my ideas from a technology perspective and customer experience perspective, but they're like, oh, hang on, that's not how it works. This is how it currently works, and this is how you need to think about it. So it's good from that perspective. Also, again, trying to keep yourself in check and not evolve and disrupt too much as well.
I think you're in a unique position where I'll classify you as a technical co-founder because you've got that background, you're a product owner, you've got the domain expert partners that can help drive the vision and give you the real granular detail on the ins and outs of the industry. Do you find yourself giving similar advice to any startups that you're mentoring or advising that if they're just a domain expert or a technical founder that they need to have sort of the yin and yang or the both like working together?
Yeah, I mean, there's no perfect, partnership. Like some companies, some VCs will say, you shouldn't have more than X number of co-founders and you need to have this structure. I think, we are in a unique position where, like, I have a technology background. I'm not a coder, but I can work with technology teams and product backgrounds. So, and the execution space. So, but then domain experience, and my co-founders have been running a business successfully for 10 years together. So, we have that sort of the COO, CFO, CEO kind of sales side covered, and then I can come in from a product and technology side, and together we make a good team. It's funny, the kind of biggest issue, and if you're on Sydney Startups Facebook group, I would expect the number 1 or 2 question would be, I'm looking for a technical co-founder.
Yep.
And it's always, business-minded people that have got great ideas but know how to build something. And there's great programs like Antler that are out there that are trying to match people from a business and technical background to build great things, and they've had some really great success stories and continue to run cohorts in that space. There's platforms out there where you can search for co-founders, whether you're technical or business side. But like, I would challenge some of those business-minded people out there to like go on Bubble, like have a crack. Like, it's actually really easy to build things right now without having any technical backgrounds. Drag and drop. Yes, it might be some learning curve, but there's also probably about 10,000 hours of YouTube videos out there as well that they could watch to just build like a prototype or an MVP that they can put in front of somebody. To make something really cheaply and simply and quickly, before they start to engage a technical co-founder and have that difficult decision around, how do I set up my business? How much equity do I give somebody? When they could probably try and do a lot of it themselves before they get to the point of needing that person in their business. Obviously, a technical co-founder has a different problem where they may not have the ability to work out how to get what they build out there.
Yep.
But again, that's a different challenge as well. But yeah, there's plenty of tools that you can build your own AI chatbot, drag and drop with with tools are out there now. So the barriers to entry, to build platforms is definitely lower. Not that those things are scalable, enterprise-based platforms, but it might get you to point A, where you have a really real need for a technical CTO to come in and be like, right, I built this great prototype, now I need to turn it into a real platform that's scalable, that's hosted on a cloud solution, and would be suitable for some sort of ISO requirement in the certification in the future that I can sell to enterprises, because there's no way a big 4 bank are going to consume this bubble.io prototype.
Yeah. It's a big stretch if they even consider looking at that.
Yeah.
So Bubble, and those tools are a great way to get.
Yeah, sorry, there's many other tools available.
The other tools, I'm not sure. There's a lot of them. I can't remember what they are. I've looked at these over the years, but they are a great way for a non-technical person to get that idea across the board. They can support you for some time, so they can help you get to your first paying customer, and maybe several others if you can get that model right. It's just another quick way to get to that. The going down the actual custom development cost, unless it's a founder doing it in their own time, it does get pricey too. So it is a big decision to make, and you have to have that vision and that idea validated. Otherwise, you're going to go in for a world of pain.
Yeah, yeah, and there's you know, there's a number of businesses, and I think this is a bigger trend that I see emerging with startups, is that there's lots of companies that are very much service based to start with. The person with the business idea is still providing traditional service based revenue, or driving revenue from that way, to build a platform in the background that will automate and do all the great things they want to solve using technology, but building their business off the base of just providing traditional services. And I think that that's a really good way to potentially scale. I mean, you can automate some of the things. Some of the things that you might be doing from a services perspective could be automated using a type form, right, or using a Google sheet. Like you can,
Microsoft Forms,
there's
anything like that.
tools, yeah, using things like Zapier and HubSpot and others, that you can automate loads of business processes, and then at the right point you go, actually, this is making sense to build a platform that does all these things. So I think that's a good way to also scale, is try to automate yourself out of your service that you're providing, until you prove the point that there's something that you should, like you say, engage a company or find talent that can build something for you, that you can then go out and sell to market.
Yeah, if you're doing it for yourself, you've got one customer proven.
Yeah.
And you or everyone always does things in their own way. There's no set way to process it, so things will have to change. But you've proven that you can increase efficiency X times, or it helps you generate X new sales. So having that validation is a great first step.
There's there's a great, just a snippet story that someone told me once at a talk, and he was saying that there's a car park software. When you go to the end of the car park and it reads your number plate and it lets you go out, if you say it's you paid for your ticket, or it's free parking, whatever it might be. When that technology was first introduced, the cameras were not good enough to pick up number plates. So instead of it doing automatically reading the number plate and registering back in a database and going, right, that person's paid for parking and they can go, you just have people at the cameras just pressing a button. Right?
Yep.
Until the technology caught up to enable them to scale the business. So everything's held up by a spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah, it's the glue that holds a lot of startups in the world together is Excel.
Yeah.
It's surprising how many things are run by Excel, and that's generally when we look at going into a business and consulting and working on sort of process improvement. It's all right. What are you running with Excel? That's the first place you can then try and automate something, because you have a process, you've got something going in. It's not foolproof. You can't have it open at the same time, or you never used to be able to, and have people editing content and doing things. But even was it in the UK during COVID was using Excel to monitor positive cases, and then I think it was at some point they didn't realize that they had overrun the number of rows, and it was maybe so they hit the row limit in Excel, but every time they added a new row, it would delete the first one, and they didn't realize for about 15 or 20,000 records. So there's a chunk of data missing, and that was, in this day and age, at that size, like organization managing things.
Oh geez, yeah, I've not heard that story before. That's terrifying.
Yeah. On sort of advisory and startups, do you work with a certain sort of industry because you've got experience along a certain way, or is it more general and the advice you provide them and the advisory services?
There's yes and yes. So I guess one would be when they're in that sort of fintech and payment space. Like, I've got particular, subject matter expertise that can help them, direct them in the right way as to what they should do to launch a product, and who they should work with from a partner perspective, and all of the considerations that it might mean for launching something in financial services. And that's very kind of specific advice versus more sort of generic advice, which is what I tend to do working with sort of the VCs and the accelerator programs, where you could be talking to somebody that's in, the pet food space, or someone that's in the dev tech space, or, in health tech, and, they're at a certain position in their business where they're probably relatively early, they may not have raised capital yet, and a lot of the lessons that, you can provide are very, unrelated to industry necessarily, as to how and what they should do. Yeah, sort of getting investment ready, how to launch an MVP, how to find the right partners to work with, how to get yourself out there from a network perspective, how to validate your value proposition and go to market. A lot of that stuff is, not necessarily, there are some nuances between industries for sure, but, at the early stage, it's relatively similar advice, so to speak. And you'll find that with the programs as well. Once you've kind of been through a few of these different programs and see the content. The content's relatively similar that they're providing. But it's great advice, obviously, for people because they've typically never heard it before. And once they do understand it, it makes a lot of sense for them, and they can try and move forward.
Yeah, from the experience I've seen, that advice is really useful because you either get, in generalization, you get really young entrepreneurs, like I don't know, uni students or people younger. I've got an idea, I want to take over the world, or they're been in a career for 15, 20, 25 years, had a lot of domain experience, seeing something that they can improve and they know how to do it better, and then that's the startup models. Then there's probably the third sliver is the really small piece, which is, as you said, service business improving a process, now thinks they can systemize their product and bring it to market. But it's really the other two where they don't have the business or marketing experience because they've been in a certain role or they haven't had enough time in the market.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, either they're new and of course they've not been in a business before. They might just be fresh out of university or in university even, and have no particularly business experience. Or you may have been in a corporate for 25 years and that's the only world you know. And trying to come out into the world of startups after being in a corporate world for 25 years would be a bit of a drinking from the fire hose.
Yeah, it's an exciting space, but I can imagine how it could be daunting just because the pace that you probably have to move. And there's no red tape compared to what you would do in a corporate.
Autonomy can be terrifying.
Yeah, especially at that level. You don't. There's nothing to check with anyone else. It's you put out whatever you want to put out whenever you're ready, and you can work at your own pace. But it is a fast-moving world, and those pivots do have to come quick and fast sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
So diving in a little bit more, probably into the weeds of sort of the product space. You've been there through sort of the waterfall model. You're working through agile. What's your take on sort of the waterfall versus agile and how a startup should probably work with designing product? Because I've got a set view on this and I don't know how different it is to what you may have.
Well, we'll see. So a waterfall, if you look at the kind of traditional sort of PMBOK approach, it does serve its purpose. Like if you're building a nuclear power station, I'd want it to be really, really detailed requirements up front. Like I'd want to spend a long time understanding all of the failure points, all of the things that I need to test. And I'd really want to go thoroughly through that process and get it verified by some business owners and some, expertise before I went off and started doing anything, laying any sort of foundation. But if you're building, something that is consumer facing in a, that's an app that you want to launch into market, that's not going to help, because you want to be able to iterate that product really, really fast based on feedback. If you're doing a sort of yes/no product where it either works or it doesn't work, then that's not gonna, it doesn't really is important. But if you're trying to continuously improve, then I think you need to get out there quickly and therefore follow that sort of, I would even call it like MVP versus like MMP or MLP, whatever you want to call it, kind of minimum marketable and minimum lovable product.
Yeah. We call it the MMVP, your most minimum.
MMVP, most minimum, yeah. To get something out there quickly. I've worked on big programs of work that are multi-vendor and running safe. As this like scaled agile framework is great, but can be challenging, particularly in different types of programs that you're running. But it does kind of work. But as long as you have the right accountability. Probably the biggest difference I find between waterfall and agile is like estimation and agile is a bit of a, I don't know how to put it. It's challenging. Like story points don't mean anything, right? It's not a tangible stuff. It's not something tangible. Whereas 1 day of effort is something that's tangible. So if I say something is a t-shirt size large and it's 20 story points, like great, when do I get it? And there's no answer in agile.
It's super subjective as well, based on who's doing it. I know there's a lot of arguments that happen on sprint planning meetings just around story points.
Yeah. So what I tend to find is you end up doing some form of what I call Wagile, which is you have, you go and you've got, 20 user stories to build, and you go, right, that's going to take me 2 sprints, and our sprints are 2 weeks each, so it's going to take us a month. It's like, okay, so you've actually done a plan, and you've estimated that work and how long it will take, and therefore you now need to finish it. Agile in some ways would, the outcome of you finishing that within the 4 weeks is like 50-50. Like based on, other things that come in, changes that come in, or whatever it might be, and it's how you manage that. And the change framework in Agile isn't as powerful as it is in waterfall. So kind of interrupting sprints and just doing stuff tends to be a little bit more loose. So like, trying to plan and provide a roadmap in Agile, I think, can be challenging unless you have a very well-structured team, which makes it hard for stakeholders to consume, right? And investors to consume when you're like, yeah, we're going to launch in like 6 months. We think it's going to be like, 4 or 5 sprints and, but things will change along the way. And, how do you therefore keep yourselves, accountable throughout that period? And that's the real art form, I think, is having a, structured plan and roadmap, but also, moving in an agile way that means you can iterate and pivot and, particularly if you've got a product live, like you might need to fix stuff along the way as well. And how do you incorporate continuous improvement as well as building new features at the same time? Can be really difficult.
It does become difficult to manage, but I think you articulated all the points there around the pros and cons of both. Instead of agile, we could have managed agile, what we call. So it's a mixture between the waterfall and the agile. So we'll be upfront, very flexible, and can move on the design phase. But then we'll fix a chunk of work, like you said, all right, it's 2 sprints or 6 sprints or 8, or what an MVP looks like, and then repeat the process. So it's a mixture of both, but very flexible in the design phase, because that's when all the exploratory discussions and workshops and your validation happens. If you're having to constantly change every 2 weeks after you develop something, you're not really planning it at all.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
becomes a problem.
Yeah, that's true. I think with roadmaps as well, like obviously agile, waterfall, you can plan for like, a year or 2 years in advance if you really want to. But with agile, in roadmaps, I tend to like to have like a fairly solid 3 months roadmap in terms of we know what we're doing. Like a fairly loose 6 months, and 12 months is just something that you put into a board paper.
Yeah, it's a guess.
Yeah,
I think around all of those points, there's probably another conversation which is going to end up being, which you sort of touched upon with sort of the investors and the board. It's all around the budget as well. I find a lot of startups struggle with agile because it's hard to put a fixed price to anything.
Yeah.
A lot of corporates struggle with agile again because you can't put an allocator budget to it, and they don't know which bucket they're taking the budget from because they don't know what the goalposts are. I find from our experience, it's best on a business that's got an established product that is just adding features. That initial round is always really hard to be very agile, I find.
Yeah, I think adding features is fine because it can be tangible and you can probably estimate a little bit easier. Yeah, if you're building something from scratch, it's really difficult to sort of guesstimate when it would be ready or suitable. And I think that's where you can take some different approaches when you're building from scratch or building brand new, really big things. Is to try and build like a straight through experience, as in like pick a flow that starts from A and ends up in B and just build all the way through. Instead of trying to build everything that sits alongside of it on the way, like, do you care if somebody can log into your platform, perform the exercise you want them to do, and get the outcome? Do you care if they can change their password? No, let it go, do it later.
Yeah,
forget about the nice stuff. Yeah, just build a core experience and then build off of that.
Yeah, that's the core value delivering. If you can't get the thing that you're promising to your customers right, then you're not going to have a system to build in the future anyway.
Yeah, like we made a decision with our platform, like we'll onboard ourselves to start with. Like we'll just capture data, we'll do it in the back end, and then somebody will get a link to log in. Like, why build an onboarding process up front? Like, we'll do that later. That'll be
with that approach.
If no one's using it, there's no point having an onboarding process.
Yeah, I had a startup we were talking to once, I can't remember where, but they were building some sort of like OCR platform for receipts and localization quite a few years ago, before all the accessibility to AO became so common. They got their customer before they finished building their platform, and they had to process 1,000 data points, I think it was, and that was the entire team online going to Google Translate, doing it by hand, because the experience on the front end looked like it was right, and everything was marked as processing, but it was all done by the hands just going through and getting it done, because it looked to the customer like it was doing what it was supposed to, but they just had to get it done. Then you don't need all the shiny stuff on the side.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, it's a very interesting space, and probably it's a really exciting space that I like to work in with the startups. That's where I think a lot of the innovation and all the new sort of stuff is happening. We're not in Silicon Valley where there's probably a lot of money flowing around and a lot more ideas, but the ones that do get off the ground here are solid and vetted, which is always a good thing to see. And I think your
Yeah, and
experience in
it's
the
good.
space has shown that.
Yeah, I think it's challenging for companies as well, particularly working with startups when they want you to build something, right? We kind of have an idea as founders what we want to build, but then we want you to give us like a price for it, and because we have a set amount of funds allocated to it, and yeah, I think it can be challenging. So like trying to work with partners that can be flexible, but understanding how that commercial framework can work at the same time as well is definitely challenging. And I'd say like the number 2 or 3 question that you see on the Sydney Facebook group is, I've got a great idea and I want to build it, like where do I go, what do I do, like, and all of a sudden there's like 400 agencies have commented, I've DM'd you, here's a link to my website, we do stuff. So that trying to find, I think particularly if you're not a technical co-founder, trying to find a partner is hard as well. So that's where I guess people that can provide advice, or working in that space or going to events and getting yourself out there can be good. But yeah, that's definitely a difficult thing for founders to find those right partners to work with.
Yeah, if you've never gone through the app development process before, it's daunting, and you don't know what you don't know. So if someone just says this is how it's done, you may believe them. They may just do what you say and build, and you don't hear from them for a month.
Yeah.
But it's really you have to have the right partner. You're building a relationship. They need to be there to support you, and you need to be able to communicate. If you can't communicate with them up front, and if all they're saying is yes, there's huge red flags already that you need to be wary of, and just shop around, or just at least talk to other groups and see how they communicate to you, how they discuss the problem.
Yeah, and if somebody wants to build something for equity, it's a red flag as well.
If it's only equity, it's always a problem.
Yeah, it just means that you're getting someone else's product. And yeah, but I think there's some great communities out there where there's founders that are kind of talking to founders and providing advice, and like how that network effect of founders is also great as well. So the startup community are really great to work with each other, and really supportive, I found anyway. So speak to other people, ask who they've used, get introductions, talk to people.
Yeah, it's definitely a great place to get some help and talk about ideas, and there may be even a mashup you can do of 2 different ideas and build a better product for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Adam, for the chat today. It's been a real pleasure. If anyone wants to find out more about you or get in touch, how can they do that?
Probably most active on LinkedIn, so please feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and connect. Normally relatively actively posting and commenting on things, so probably the best place. And yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, we'll put those links out in the notes for the episode as well. Thanks, Adam.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. Cheers.
Thanks.